Government has a very important role to play in maintaining a working democracy and in fostering a strong economy. And government does that through the needs it meets and the services that it provides, and those are funded by the state budget. And the most important thing that the legislature does every 2 years is write a state budget for the upcoming 2 years. So we budget on a 2-year cycle. And in Texas, as in almost all the states, the state government can't run a deficit. We can only spend the amount of revenue that we think that we're going to have. And so every legislative session, the most important questions are, how much are we going to need? How much are we going to have? Are we going to be short? And if so, what are we going to do about it? And I'm going to share with you kind of our projection on those questions today. And what makes this upcoming session a very difficult one by all projections is that we're coming out of the Great Recession. And we anticipate having some very high needs and not near the kind of state revenue that we would hope to meet those needs. And one thing that you have heard people say is that when families are facing tough economic times, they tighten their belt. How many of y'all have heard that? Okay. Well, that's true, because when you face a tough economic time, the fastest, most immediate option available to you is to tighten your belt. But that's not all that families do when they face tough economic times. One of the things that families do is they look for additional income. And so we're going to talk about how that might play into the picture. Now, why is it that budgets go up? Why do budgets go up? Well, budgets go up because we have more people, we have higher costs, we often have greater needs, and we usually have larger goals. And that tends to drive our budgets up. So what I want to start with, well, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself because B asked me to put in a little Methodism into this. I was fixing to just give you all the dry version without the Methodism. B didn't mention, but the Center for Public Policy Priorities was founded by Benedictine sisters. This is our 25th year. And when they founded the center, they adopted as their mission statement, really, Matthew 25, verse 40. And they commissioned this original artwork, B. Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. And we're now an independent 501c3, but that piece of artwork hangs in my office. And I went to see what John Wesley might have ever said about this particular very powerful verse. And he wrote a whole sermon on it, the Sermon on Visiting. I don't know how many of y'all have read the Sermon on Visiting. But John Wesley had a take on Matthew 25, verses 30 to 41. He called this verse the Converting Ordinance. Ordinance here meaning law. The converting law or the converting principle. And what he meant by that was that if you followed this commandment, if you visited, you've jumped ahead. If you visited the sick, if you took food to the hungry, if you just followed the commandment, it changed you. The process of doing these things changed you. And so Wesley said, it is far better to carry relief to the poor than to send it. Because this is far more apt to soften our heart and make us naturally care for each other. So one of the things I'm going to show you then, try to give you a sense of, is what the state budget does and what budget cuts would mean to real people. So you can think about if you were actually delivering this help yourself, it would be converting your heart. And interestingly enough, you actually see that. You see these terribly curmudgeonly legislators get elected, and then they're down here for 10, 15, 20 years, and they're different at the end than at the beginning, and sometimes it upsets their constituents who haven't seen what they've seen. They're actually affected by seeing the people that the state budget has so much impact on. Let's take a look then at this budget scenario. What you've got here is you've got a picture, and for some reason we're having a PowerPoint problem because it didn't all come up, but we'll go with this. You've got a picture that shows you 5 bienniums back, and at the far right, that's the 2012-13 biennium, the one biennium forward. And on the left, it's in millions of dollars, and the right shows you what we need to write the upcoming budget. So starting at the top, that very black at the top, ARA is the federal stimulus money. In other words, we got money from the federal government because of the economic downturn that we used to write the budget for 2010 and 11. And now that money's gone, or will be gone, and we need $7 billion of our own money just to replace that federal money. Then for higher education, we need $1 billion more. And I heard somebody whisper at least, and so let me explain where these projections are from. This is looking at historical spending. So this is looking backwards at historical spending and saying if we spent in the future like we spent in the past, this is what we need. And that turns out to be less than covering inflation and population growth. So these numbers, when I say this is what we need, we're just projecting historical spending, and that's more than we spent last time, but less than population growth and inflation. For higher ed, it would be $1 billion. Then you see that gray in the middle, the local tax cut. So y'all all understand that in 2006, the legislature took the local school property tax from $1.50 per 100 of value down to $1 per 100 of value. But they only raised new state taxes to cover the trip from $1.50 to $1.20. So what covered the rest of the trip from $1.20 to $1? Well, the inadequate state revenue stream we had before April of 2006. And so we have what you'll hear everybody refer to now, the lieutenant governor, everybody, as this structural deficit, that maintaining that tax cut is $10 billion just gone to maintain that tax cut. Then for the rest of K through 12, we need $3 billion. So that's to cover student enrollment growth and higher costs, $3 billion. And then growth for health and human services is $3.3 billion. And then prisons is $300 million. And everything else that government does is $700 million. And most of what is in that $700 million is health care for public employees. Those are mostly health care costs for public employees. So you throw in $1 billion that we'll probably need just to finish up this biennium, and we have a need for $17 billion. Now we'll talk about where that money is going to come from in just a minute. But what I want to emphasize about this is that's less than population growth and higher cost. That's just historical spending, so that doesn't account for any kind of greater needs, nor does it account for any kind of larger goals.